Welcome, Grand Archive fans, to a very special video that we have today on Main Deck, and actually, also, it's going to be showing up on, well, actually, I didn't ask, is this going to be on TalkGA or Solar Games? Mark from TalkGA from Solar Games.
If it has all sorts of financial manipulation, it would definitely be on my main channel, Solar Games.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
All
Good
right.
to know. And that was my way of sort of smoothly putting my introduction for our good friend, Mark from Solar Games, or Mark from TalkGA from Solar Games,
Sure.
from Worlds Casting, from whatever.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy. This is a long-awaited discussion. I am so sorry. We should have had this interview chat 4 or 5 months ago, but I think that's actually fairly prudent that we're doing it now, before we get on with our casting for Worlds, but also more importantly, before the 1-year anniversary of Grand Archive. And what a year it has been, at least, for those of us that knew about it for a year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was a long time coming. You and I have tried to set this up for actually a long time, but both of us have just had very busy schedules and have never been able to quite align things. So I'm super excited that we finally got to get together and celebrate
Yes.
the just Grand Archive, which has been one of our favorite games
Yes.
of all time.
Mhm.
And I think this will be really fun. The way we're doing this, everyone. So, we're going to, if you're here on Main Deck, we're going to be talking a lot about the gameplay of Grand Archive and all of the sort of the game related elements that will be just kind of a fun little check in. How's the game doing? What's
Yeah.
the game like? What draws us to the game? And where do we see it going from here gameplay wise? And then we're going to head over to Solar Games, and you can meet us over there, where we're going to chat on Mark's channel about Mark's specialty, which is finance in trading card games. Certainly, if you're here, that's not my specialty. I have a bunch of games here that you should not have any copies of if you're trying to make a buck on your card games, but maybe Mark will have a little bit of better advice for you. So we'll chat about that over there. I'm
Yeah.
excited for that chat too, Mark.
Cool. Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited too, because let's be honest, even though we both play Erupting, we know which one's the better Erupting player. So
it's between the two of us, it's Matt. Actually,
that's right. Matt G. That's right. Okay. Cool. Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's kick it off. You have some great questions for us here. Let's jump in.
Yeah. So I really want to know, right? And by the way, I think I said this back on the last celebration stream. I think it was the Christmas one. But man, Dan, you're amazing. Like, you got all the questions. And you got so many playmats. It was insane. So I know your game knowledge is 100%. You're probably deck building before people even know what Crux means, right? And so I really want to know, right? At this 1-year junction, after it kind of went to mass market release, what are your general thoughts about Grand Archive? How do you feel about the game right now?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know if I can necessarily agree that I'm ahead of the curve on any particular deck building. I think we have seen some pretty incredible deck builders and brewers come out and really show people, some surprising strategies. Like the rise of Luxem in the last set has been a really welcome thing to see, because I have on my channel, I have an old water Luxem list that you could play. It was playable, but it wasn't winning tournaments. And I think that's, I can put an idea out there, but I can't quite bring it home to that competitive level. But that's where other people who get to play more don't have to spend their time making content can really show their expertise. That said, my passion for the game is entirely unabated. It has been a year of the game existing, but it has been almost 3 years of knowing about the game, patiently or impatiently waiting for the release of the game, playing print and plays. If I cared to, I could go over here. I still have the first print and play decks printed out,
Crazy.
in sleeved up. If you want to play some, I think there's a card in there called Ring of the Avenger that doesn't exist anymore and stuff like this. So there's a bunch of, and a bunch of doodle art that was all they had at the time.
Banned cards. All right. I got it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. I have been enjoying the game since the first time that I got to print and play it. And when we first saw it, it was such a special thing. I've talked about this a few times, so I'm not going to like repeat myself too much. But I first saw that picture of Lorraine through a Facebook ad, and then I saw that and I thought, I don't know why, but I feel like what I'm looking at is not like the other Kickstarter TCGs that
Mm,
I've seen. I feel like
mm,
there was a sort of a professional appearance to it,
yeah,
an attention to detail
yeah,
that I felt was like really present in there. And if you guys are main deck followers normally, you'd know that I follow games well enough to be able to. I feel like I'm able to effectively tier list the entire list of published games that are out there
yeah,
and everything. And I do frequently do periodic content on like Kickstarter TCGs that are releasing and everything. Some of that goes to our Patreon, but um, that I follow the industry and I
hmm
don't just dive into every game. And people on my live streams like to tease me a little bit because I'll be looking at. I've done a few live streams recently for some other Kickstarter games, and I'll every time I'll be like, they'll be like, cardstock's good, and I'll be like, cardstock's fine. It's not Grand Archive,
yeah,
you know. It's
yeah.
like,
Oh
and
my gosh, yes, these cards are so good. They're so good. Oh my
they're
god, and
it's
they're getting better.
yeah, I
That's
know.
the craziest part. It's like when we thought this was like okay, this is like the highest tier. They were like, we're gonna make a new tier, and then we're gonna get in it, and then we're 2 tiers above even the best. So
Yep.
it's crazy.
It and they make fun of me, right? Because I'll constantly just compare everything. Like, well, Grand Archive though, like is um and they're like, okay, Dan, we get it. You have a bias, and I'm like, I do. I'm not going to argue that,
yeah,
but my bias, I feel, is based on logical comparison of
yeah,
this with other stuff. A lot of the
yeah,
time,
yeah, yeah,
Grand
yeah,
Archive frequently, in many ways, sits at the top of the pack.
yeah.
I think its biggest downfall is just that it has not become more popular yet.
hmm
That's like the I there's a I can and we'll talk about it a little bit too. I'm sure there'll be a couple other things I can point out, be like areas to work on, to think
Yeah,
about, to look
yeah.
at. But every time I play a locals, and recently, and this is the true testament. My last two locals, I've been playing different Arasana builds.
Okay,
Okay,
nice, nice.
every time I play a locals, though, I fall more in love with the game, like consistently,
Yeah,
because I keep finding these like I'll explore an Arasana deck, in the way that I think I can make it the most competitive possible than in the current, and again, like I said, like that's probably not true. There's someone out there who's doing a better job, I'm sure,
yes, 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 yes.
but um, I'll try and come to my most optimized build for it. I'll start playing and be like, this is actually like surprisingly functional,
hmm
fun. And the biggest thing is like I playing each deck I play, I'm like, this feels like I've tapped into another unique part of this game fabric
hmm
where I haven't, like Arasana is kind of like Rai, but not in other ways too. The,
Yeah,
the way that
yeah,
the way that she establishes her end game is like, whoa, okay, like now this is a deck that's like it's gonna kill you eventually, but it's weaker to like regalia removal a little bit, and it has like different, like Rai loves to load up on arcane cards right away.
yeah.
He's like, fine, I'll banish them. Arasan is like, do not give me arcane cards, please.
Astro
um,
cards. Yeah,
yeah, or
yeah,
well, yeah, don't give her arcane cards either.
yeah.
Don't give
That
me
will
Astro
work.
cards. Or don't give me advanced element cards.
Yeah,
And I just like all the ways the devs have found to kind of explore these different
yeah.
champions.
hmm
Just like fascinates me, and I just think it's such a deep and engaging game, not only in play but in deck building. So sorry, I will just keep going, but let me let you interrupt and talk some.
Sure, sure, sure. What's the original question? A 1 year anniversary? Yeah. Um, yeah. This game is amazing. I think I agree with you. I'm surprised it's not as big as it should be. I think it deserves a bigger audience, a bigger engagement. And the funny thing is, it's trying, right? Like, look at all the events we have. They're not just national; they're worlds,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we have events in like Taiwan and like Southeast Asia. I mean, I guess it's kind of like a dead zone maybe in Europe, but like otherwise, like there's Oceania, so I mean New Zealand, Australia, pretty much like it's where it can be, it's being played, right? And I just think like, when I think about other games, right? So like kind of if I could tier list this game against other games I know, and I don't really know that many. I've really not played a lot of other games. But I kind of feel like this game just is so much better in a lot of ways that, it has a lot of the good elements of the older games I like, right? Interactability is really key for me. I
Mhm.
cannot play a game where it's like, all right, it's my turn. Dan, go have a coffee, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I did on my turn, and it's totally fine. There's a lot of games like that nowadays, right? Because they're trying to go for simplicity, more people getting involved. But I just feel like there's some elements of that's lost. That part, I think Magic the Gathering like has done really well. That super interactive playability. Like I'm going to counter your spell. I'm going to put stacks. Like I'm going to giant growth this creature, but I'm going to shock it so it dies before the giant growth lands. That's amazing. That interaction, all in itself, is one of the most like iconic things of like the stack and this counterplay. I think Grand Archive captures that really well. But it also at the same time fixes a lot of the problems of those old card games, right? Like even today, I listened to the latest episode. I still listen weekly to MTG Goldfish. It's like this podcast. You play Magic, these podcasters.
Mhm.
But they were talking about like how they have to ban certain lands because you're still going to have land screwed. And like if you mana like Armageddon, destroy all lands. So for those, Grand Archive players, sorry, this is like, I'm diving so deep into another game. But like lands are the resources. It's like what you put in memory. The problem with Magic is those are actually separate cards. You have to have a card that says this is an energy or land card. When I have this card, then I can play my like hasty messenger or whatever. Right, so you're separating your deck essentially into two sides, like the land side and non-land side. They can't just interchangeably be used, right? And so you get into this situation where, like, what if you don't draw your lands? You can't actually play any cards. And so even today, 30 years after, Magic being as great of a game as it is, it just can't solve this problem. There are games where, guess what? You're going to have the best deck. You can't draw your lands, and it sucks. It's the worst game for you, right? And that's not a good feeling to play. Like, imagine you're the winning side. Sure, at a GP or at a big tournament, it's great to get a free win, right? But doesn't actually feel that great because you didn't have a good game. It was just like, oh, well, they didn't draw the most basic thing they needed for their hand, so they couldn't do anything. I just won. It's yeah. So when I think about it, like from just the few games I play, I think GA is like top tier. Really, I think it's gameplay wise, it's better than Magic. Because it, again, has all the things that I like about Magic, but it doesn't have the things that I don't like about Magic. And the only thing that I would say is even weak compared to Magic right now is that the card pool is limited, right? And the formats are limited. But as we've released on TalkJ, the PVE format, right? Unofficial, but still a format that somebody in the community is building. I'm sure there's other ideas. We're gonna have talking with the devs. They're really still thinking about draft and how to bring that back to the game, right? And have that a limited format for the game. And then beyond that too, like we're just going to get more and more cards that will give us the ability to create more and more interesting decks. And I can only say, it's just going to keep going up from here. So yeah.
Yeah, the land system thing is such an interesting topic, and one of the things that first like I immediately latched onto when we got the first like full rule set for the game, and they showed these print and play decks and everything, and I started printed them off, started playing. I noticed immediately that there's I think we talked about just a little bit, so I apologize if this is repeat stuff for people who listen. I think it was the community spotlight with Lineage Break Cam. I think we talked about this a little, but I noticed that there was sort of the subtle what I felt was a take on lands that was fixed that people don't necessarily notice in GA, but it's this idea that um, your deck may or may not have a level 3 with
Mm-hmm.
that may or may not have advanced element cards in your deck.
Mm-hmm.
And advanced element cards, my read on them immediately was like, okay, these are lands, but they're fixed, right?
Yeah.
These are lands that, because in the first few turns of the game, all I can do is use these as resources, which is
Yes.
during an entire game of Magic, that's all I can do with my lands, right?
Correct.
But when I get to the late game now, instead of drawing lands, I'm drawing the best cards in my deck. And
Agreed.
I have this, and I think a lot of the time when we look at a good game design, one of the key things that we're looking for is a source of tension, which sounds a little unusual to people who aren't familiar with game design. It's like,
Hmm.
why do I want tension? Tension is a thing I want
Hmm.
not in my life, right? I
Yeah.
want, I just want to be chill and I want to be
Yeah.
calm and I want to be enjoying everything. But
Yeah.
a good game is built entirely on tension. It's
Yep.
like even at the core fundamental of the game, it's you and another player, and only one person can win.
Yep.
You have PVE format, right? But the tension there is, are we all going to win or lose,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If a game is dependent on the fact that somebody wins or something wins and something loses, otherwise you're just
Hmm.
coloring in a coloring book or
Correct.
whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no
It
contest,
doesn't progress anywhere.
right? And a so games a good game introduces tensions in it, not just necessarily that do I, who wins, who loses, but tensions in different ways. And in all card games, we all accept, if you're a card game player, you accept one particular tension on a core level, which is you will not always see the same cards.
Hmm.
You are going to have to work with what you get in some
Hmm.
way. And the tension is, are you going to see the cards you need, or are you going to be able to figure it out, work with what you have to win the game? So that's like a fundamental thing that we all accept. And if you don't accept that, you play chess instead, where it's completely deterministic.
Correct.
Um, and then on another level, then the game usually continues to introduce more tensions. This tension that I found in this was that I can fill my deck with as many of the most powerful cards in the game that I want to.
Yeah.
Card pool's big enough, I could have 60 advanced element cards in my deck. I'm like, when I get to level 3, I am going to win, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is, am I going to get to level 3 when I can't do anything until
Yep.
I get to level 3? And so I found this fascinating. I looked at these decks and I thought, okay, so like I could, I have a knob that I'm tweaking. Like, how powerful do I want my end game to be?
Yeah.
But then the more powerful I make my end game,
Hmm.
the less options I have in the early game.
Yep.
To the point where I can also just completely twist it the other way and be like, I'm going to put no advanced element cards in my. This is like you're playing a deck with no lands, but you can play everything in your deck, which is like the consistency is unmatched.
Yeah.
Which is why we see allies decks that are just like, yep, like they're
Yep.
consistent. They put the 2/3s out, they attack, they win the game eventually, right? But what beats those decks? The decks that can go to 3 and just outvalue them. And just having that option in there, I was like, this is so cool. This is such a cool fix. I like this fix so much more
Yeah.
than other games that have completely serviceable fixes
Yeah.
to land. So I look at a game like Shadow vs. Evolve, which is a game that I think
Okay.
is a good game. I like
Yeah.
that game.
Okay.
The fix to that is the fix that many other games have taken, which is just you get a resource every turn. It's not even a card.
Mm.
It's just it uses an app instead. Just like ding,
Okay.
I got one.
Okay.
You could use like a pile of coins or whatever you want.
Marvel Snap does this. I think
Yep.
Hearthstone does this too, right? You
Yep.
just get a guaranteed resource every turn.
Yep.
Okay.
And that 100% fixes your mana screw issue. You're always going to have the resources.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it removes attention
Yes.
from the game.
Yes. Yes. Holy shit. What a mic drop moment. Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy.
Right. And that's, that's what I love about GA is how it perfectly balances like all
Both.
things.
Yeah.
The tensions between multiple different elements of the game, where every time I sit down in a game, I almost never have a game where I'm like, I just drew, I was just totally screwed by my draws. They're just
Yep.
like, and keep in mind, I'm coming at this from after nationals, my day 2 of nationals, where
man.
I could not string together erupting rhapsodies to save my life, quite literally
Yeah.
to save my in-game life. But I still didn't feel like I felt like that was a desert. Like I went in with a deck whose sole purpose was I'm going to coin flip. I'm just like, if I see it, it's really good. If I don't, it's really bad. And
Yeah.
I could have played a deck that was allies, and I could have just been like, even my worst hands, I can,
They're
I
2/3s.
can deal.
Everything's a 2/3.
Yep. And you just it's a choice you have going into it. It's all built. All the deck building is built on this choice that then permeates into the gameplay in a way that is it's so tight, it's so clean, it's so full
Yeah.
of decisions. I'll keep going, but
Yeah.
it's a wonderful game.
So you brought up Shadowverse. We started talking a little bit about other games too. Where do you think GA ranks in your mind against other games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I have to be careful. Just on
Oh,
the
do you have
channel.
like monetary obligations?
There are games that I really really love right now.
Yeah,
I think we're in one of the best times for card games
I think so.
ever.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, it's this mimics some early eras where creativity reigned in different ways, and lots of companies were putting out really stellar, at least I would say objectively right now the game design is better than it was then, just because I think it's the whole like we're standing on shoulders of giants. It's people who are
Correct.
just like
Yep.
taking some of these designs we're seeing are like, this is kind of like that old game,
Yep.
but I made it not bad.
Yeah.
you know um, and some of them are still just like new approaches to games, none of them quite as off the wall as the late 90s,
Mm-hmm.
early 2000s
Mm-hmm.
were. You had some designs then that were just like, how do you even why do you think people will buy this? This is just like an absurd like madman design for a card game. And then you had ones that were super innovative and totally
Yeah.
like paved the way, trailblazed for like, I like to think of Decipher's Lord of the Rings game actually is the one where,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people know that one's it's a bit of a well, it's not that niche because
Yeah.
that was when the movies were out and it was popular, but um, that game had you playing both light and both the heroes, and you had a deck of your monsters,
Uh-huh.
and you played both sides
Uh-huh.
each game, playing like monsters to stop your opponent, and your fellowship was progressing.
Oh, okay.
So, people came up with creative stuff back then.
Huh.
These days, the TCGs right now are very refined.
Yeah.
It's less stuff that's like, here's my wacky way to implement the flavor of this. For example, case in point, we have Star Wars Unlimited,
Yeah.
which is, I would say, the least like simulationist Star Wars game that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
One of the lower simulationist Star Wars games we've seen, where I like to talk about the you have simulation games and abstraction games. Simulation ones are trying to make it feel like you're standing on Tatooine and you're, moisture farming, and then you win the game somehow because you moisture farmed the
Okay.
best.
Okay.
The abstraction games are the ones where it's like, this is a Luke, and he's a Luke because he's a 7, and he
Yeah.
beats your Leia because your Leia's a 4, and
Yeah.
it's like, it's literally just war, but we put some pictures on it. It's
Correct.
like,
Yeah.
so we're
Wow.
just abstracting at the highest level, like
Yeah.
one side beats the other, but with some pretty pictures. And Star Wars Unlimited is like one of the middle ground. Like, there's simulation in some of the flavor and everything, but it is more on the abstraction end.
Okay.
Just like
Yeah.
trying, and that's because they focus on just clean, approachable game design,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the way a lot of TCGs are right now.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
I think a lot of Bandai games. You look at the Bandai games in particular. We'll talk about some of these later, but Bandai games are all very much this way. It's like, where's the theme? It's in the cards. It's like, you want your Goku to charge up power, and you want your Frieza to be kind of like sneaky, deceptive, and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's how you make Dragon Ball Z show up in the game. But otherwise, it's a game of plaything, attack, plaything, attack, and it doesn't do anything. It's as simulationist as some of the previous Dragon Ball Z incarnations
Mm-hmm.
have been as well.
Got it.
So all that is to say, in this era of card game design, I think there is a lot of focus on clean game design. And because of that, a lot of games are really easy to get into and play and enjoy, and they're just more approachable and more just at a core level functional,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I think another reason, there's a pile of these, but
Yeah.
that's be for a whole other hour of discussion. But that's another reason why this is an era where a lot of these games are performing well, because they're not as niche anymore, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
they've expanded to be approachable and better for an audience that way.
Like you're reskinning a game. So like if I were to be really good at, let's say, Dragon Ball Z, I can probably learn Grand Archive quickly, XYZ. Like I can translate between games. So it's the more approachable. I don't have to spend a lot of time to be even like decently capable at the game, right?
you're not learning totally different skill sets each time. There are a
Yeah.
few games still right now, Universes, Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah.
Off the top of my head, those are the first two I think of that are like games that are like these play differently
Yeah.
than what you're used to.
Yeah.
But a lot of games have very approachable skill sets and very transferable skill sets.
Hmm.
Grand Archive is, I think, in between. It has some very familiar elements, but the core mechanisms of managing your hand size for your memory and for your reserve and being able to
Yeah.
uh, materialize materializing appropriately is its whole other thing. Again, another hour we could talk about the strategy for
Yeah.
materializing.
That's right.
But and then at the core level, it's you're going to play allies and you're going to attack, or you're going to play attacks and you're going to
Yeah.
deal damage,
Yeah.
and that's approachable and easy to understand. So I say all of that is finally to get to the core
He's going to
question
give us
you
the
asked.
answer, guys. Finally.
I will. I'll get there. But people, if they're on main deck here, they know I'm going to talk for a long time.
Yeah.
So hopefully they're here for it.
Sure.
To say that I think Grand Archive does some of those things to it's at least as good as the other games that are currently out there.
Yeah.
And I think there are elements that it does better.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, I find the depth of deck building decision making and the depth of decision trees within a game
Yeah.
based on this ability to play anything at any point. And like I said earlier, this tension between how you are putting in advanced elements, strategies you're using, and that linking of the material deck with the deck to the point where your turns are highly dependent on what you materialize.
Yeah.
What you materialize is highly dependent on the board state.
Yep.
And also highly dependent on what you've already materialized.
Yeah.
Your decision turn one as to what you materialize. Should you materialize your level 1? Should you materialize a temporal spectrometer, which you should, because more people should be playing that card? Should you materialize the other day, main deck Taylor just went, he's playing Lorraine. He went turn 1, Sword of Seeking. And I was like, or turn 2, Sword of Seeking, I should say. And I was like, where's Lorraine? Like, I was like, oh, okay. But he had a line where he didn't need to do Lorraine yet. He didn't need to lose the card to accomplish what he needed to do that turn. And then he got a different sword next turn, and it all kind of worked out in a different way for him. So it was like, there are unique lines that then cascade. Their decision cascades deep into the game.
Yeah.
And I find that to make it easily one of the best games on the market right now. So the best I can do for you, just given my enjoyment of other games for different reasons, is it is S tier gameplay wise.
Okay.
With a small number of other games that I think are S tier for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
That's
okay, guys. He said top tier. We're good. We're good. He said top tier. I don't think there's this is not like maybe some weird Japanese thing where there's like 3 S's or something like.
Oh yeah.
S tier.
SSS.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm actually kind of curious, right? Because we were talking about how the game does blend. Where do you think is the most unique part about Grand Archive?
It's the memory system. That's a almost a cop out answer, because the memory system includes reserving and materializing, which is like, it's at that point I've named 3/4 of the game, but that was the thing that I first saw, that having played a million other card games, I watched that play out. I remember watching I was dying for this quick play video to release the 8-minute video that they put on the Kickstarter. Maybe it's even less than 8 minutes, 4-minute video or something. It was on the Kickstarter front page.
Yeah.
I watched that as soon as the YouTube link dropped for it. And I'm watching through because we didn't know the rules yet. I was just making guesses at everything.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was like, okay, like, yep, champ. I kind of figured out that you would put a champion out. They showed the spirits. I was like, and when they first showed the spirits, there were people who were like, draw 7 cards. That's busted. These people don't know how to design a game. And I was like,
you get
pretty sure that's just your opening hand.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's just your opening. I think that's not too hard to figure out.
Yeah.
So we watched that all play out, and then they finally showed how to pay costs and put the cards down.
Mm-hmm.
And then they showed the materialize, and I was like,
boom,
this is wild.
Boom. Yeah.
And immediately I started seeing that decision tree pan out like how you can play cards. But
Yeah.
unlike some other also great games right
Yeah.
now, you don't put a card down and it stays there.
Yeah.
It's like you put it down and then you're risking it, right?
It's
And like,
fluid. It's so fluid. Yeah.
yeah,
And you've cast the game, so you know that tension well, which is there's always that like, oh, he didn't put that card down, did he? And he's about to risk it, right? And
yeah,
oh, like he's got to have a second copy, right? No, he doesn't. What the like? Oh,
yep.
had he known his opponent was going to do this, he should have kept the flame sweep and not the other. I mean, there's just so many things that goes into that, like the memory space. It's insane. I think it's honestly also like one of the most unique part of it. I would like to add, though, I think one of the other things I really like about Grand Archive, I think maybe this appeals to a lot of the RPG players, or like the reason why maybe Commander is so popular in Magic is this like hero fantasy.
Yeah.
Like I want to have a champion, and this champion gets stronger, and it has like weapons and shields and like helmets. I mean, this is actually why I like Flesh and Blood too. Like I really like that. Like I got an armor, I got a whole armament, like this whole thing that is defines who I am, like what armor I put on. And then these things help me advance my game, right? And they're unique to me because, like, if you're not playing that champion, you may have like spell books or guns or staffs or whatever, right?
People who know the decks that I've been playing too also know that I am the first person to do wacky things with my lineage. I It's not just that we have that hero fantasy, because that's absolutely there, and I love that I can just go like, yeah, okay, like I'm just gonna be an Arasana main. I'm just gonna try and play Arasana all the time. But
Yeah.
then players like me can just go, well, hang on, like what can I do with this now? They added, especially when they added the innervates in FTC, and it was like my world just changed. I build so many hybrid decks in different ways, hybridizing your level 1 going into a lineage break level 2, hybridizing your level 2s and 3s. And like recently, I think I can say this now because I think we decided it's not going anywhere, but I had a Rye Vanitas hybrid deck
Okay.
that was an erupting deck. That
Okay.
was, yep. And it was wacky. The whole concept was you would go to Vanitas level 1 to put down fertile ground
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make make a bunch of extra plus level herbs,
Yeah.
and then you would level back down with Innervate Fury
To then
or Innervate
agility.
Agility. You
Yeah.
could play either one because you had both elements when you're at Vanitas, and then you could go back to Rye level 1 and open up Fireball.
Jesus.
Okay, it was like, okay, so did that deck work out? It was close, actually. It's better than you think it is. I'll say that, but it's clunkier than the more efficient decks that are trying to do similar things.
Yeah.
On the plus side, it can win a long game like Merlin can, but without having to lose a bunch of cards going to 3.
Hmm.
Because once you get the herb and the fertile grounds down, then you are getting a Merlin +1 level every single turn, but you didn't have to lose 5 cards to get there.
Correct.
So it had some interesting advantages, but that's the kind of stuff that like Grand Archive just feels so crazy open to me in the weird space you can explore. There is actually one I can't tell you about.
Okay. All right.
But that's because the main deck competitive team is playing in an Ascent Worlds also,
Ooh,
and I can't spoil
spicy,
things.
spicy. That's awesome. All right. What about like challenges? What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges, worries, like going into like year 2 of Grand Archive?
Yeah, I mean the number one challenge right now is the growth of the game, and I mean that's the thing that I get the most commentary from people who
Yeah.
see the passion that I have for Grand Archive. I talk about it all the time. I say, look at the card stock, look at the
Yeah.
gameplay, look at
Yeah.
whatever. It's all the great things. And I say, that's great. I can't find anywhere to play it. I
Yeah.
don't have any players to play with. That just briefly is that's the thing that I see the devs also in the background addressing right now, doing putting out initiatives. We talked in the podcast about Sill's been teasing the Grand Archive Academy thing that they're working on, which is using targeted advertisements in consenting LGSs, who then get sent players and then they're sent product to run with those players, giving them a bunch of free packs and stuff that they get to start with. and their test regions so far were very successful with that. Initiatives like that are
Yeah.
like not it's classic Grand Archive, just like kind of not reinventing the wheel, but
Yeah.
inventing a better wheel in some ways. Um, that's the kind of thing that I'm excited to see them do to continue to address those. But right now, like the obvious answer, if anyone's listening, was waiting for me to say, is that the issue is the player base needs to grow. It just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah,
How about you?
consistently too on the Patreon. That's what I hear echoed all the time.
Yep.
Everybody loves the game. Everybody loves cards, whether they're collecting, whether they're playing the game, whether they're trying to play the game. Yeah, consistently, it's like I got to drive an hour. I'm not going to drive an hour, right? The closest game store doesn't want to carry it. Like I think one of the things, right, and I have not shared this publicly yet, so this is the first time it's unveiled on Main Deck's channel. One of
Wow.
my patrons actually emailed me and messaged me and just like was really distraught because like I mean and the funny thing is the concerns, so he basically said my LGS owner doesn't want to carry this game, and the concerns are exactly what I had about a year ago. So if you recall, like initially I was very like hesitant about this game for two reasons. Number one, it was like, look, it's like, is this like an anime thing? Are we doing like a, you know, like the artwork doesn't fit like maybe what I'm trying to do. Like I'm just here to play a game. You know, I'm not like, you know, I'm not trying to like oogle at like anime girls, right? That
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it too is like I actually had a big concern about Weeps of the Shore as a name for the company because it
I did
did
too.
fail. It did
I
feel
brought
like,
that up to them right away.
is this just a joke? Are we like, I mean, like where are we gonna go? Like, okay, look back in 10 years when this company's big. You're called Weeps of the Shore. Like, really? You know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, we got to be like, what, the Grand Archive. Come on. Like, this is something, anything, right? Just that part also, because, and that's credibility, right? Because I get it. It's like a bunch of dudes out of college or whatever, right? Who are like, hey, we should make a card game. And it would be funny if we called ourselves Weeps of the Shore, right? But the problem is, like, you can see, like, an LGS, and maybe it doesn't matter. It's just one store. But like one LGS, who's maybe somebody who's really thinking deeply about this thing, but not haven't looked at all the avenues, are making a judgment based on a thing that really shouldn't matter, but it does matter. So yeah, it's tricky. It's really tricky, right? And so when I saw those two concerns, like that is strangely familiar, right? Hearing that even a year after, like when I first, you know, made those comments about like my concerns. So I think it's also growth. I just think it's like, and it sucks because what happens is, you know, like for growth to happen, you kind of need like at least like 4 to 6 players minimum, right, to get that going. If you have 1 or 2, you're actually more likely to lose those small pockets of players to every other card game that's popular. And consistently I hear I go to LGS, and if they're not playing Magic, it's Lorcana or One Piece. Lorcana, One Piece all the time, right? So kind of flipping this back to you, like Dan, you know a lot more about those two games, I think, than me. What do you think that Lorcana and One Piece has over Grand Archive? Other than IP. IP is the easy answer. I don't want to hear that. What else? Is there anything else?
It is the easy answer, and I would be it would be a mistake for me not to mention that it is a big part of I mean
True.
it is,
Yes.
frankly, but
Yes.
I think I do think that those games are stronger in approachability in a couple of ways than Grand Archive.
Okay.
I think One Piece and Lorcana, any IP recognizable game,
Yeah,
has this advantage already because players come in. You don't have to find the players who want to try the game. You get people who aren't players yet walking into the store and saying, I heard there was One Piece cards and I want One Piece cards.
Yeah.
But both of these companies, both Bandai and Ravensburger, were smart in the way they approached their games, in that they then built them to be very easy to pick up and play.
Yeah.
I put when I tier listed things, I put One Piece as and Lorcana. They're both on my list of easiest to learn TCGs.
Yeah.
Because I think One Piece is Bandai's easiest to learn game. It flows really easily. It's some familiar stuff you've seen before. Its resource system just does work for you. It still has a little bit of interesting decision making and how you use your Dawn every turn.
Yeah.
But it does the thing that Grand Archive doesn't do, where it handholds you through. Not something I
Mm,
mentioned yet, but like games that are resource per turn.
mhm.
Resource turn one, I have one. Turn two, I have two. Turn three, I have
Yeah.
three, or more. It depends on how the game works, but those games do you can either call it handholding or railroading, but
Yeah.
they put you on rails basically and
Yeah.
say it is turn one. You have one resource. Which of your cards in your hand would you like to play for one resource? You look at your hand. You have one card with one resource. You have two options. Should you play nothing, or should you play the card that costs one? Play the card that costs one. Go to
Yeah.
turn two.
Yeah.
Okay, look at your hand. You now have two options because they
Yeah.
both cost two. Which one would you like to play? You know, Grand Archive, Flesh and Blood, also Universes. Also, some of these games are games that lose out on that approachability
Right.
because instead it's like an L. They take the L on this because instead of just showing you here's the thing you should do this turn and making it easier for you to get to the end game and kind of experience the full game, they
Yeah.
say it's turn one. You have seven options. Which would you like to play?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that is the gain on that is the thing that I said was incredible of Grand Archive, which is that remarkable decision tree depth where it goes
Mm,
all the way back to your first decision of the early turns and the cards you put in your memory and what you risked and what you materialized and everything.
yeah.
Um, and then the loss is that when someone does come in and they go, you know what, that art looks really cool. That game looks really neat. I saw some people playing it. It looked really neat. I want to try it. Then they start playing it, and it's just a little bit trickier for them
Yeah.
to draw their opening hand and go, well,
What
what?
do I do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do I do now?
Yeah.
And it also means that there are decisions that are uh, easy to screw up. That's I think the side that is not talked about as much either. But like decisions are harder to make, and that also means they're easier to make wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Case in point, how many people's first game of Grand Archive were turn one, level zero, turn two, level one, turn three, level two, turn four, level three. I have one card left in hand, or two cards, or whatever.
I did not
Yep,
know how to play this game at all.
me too.
Yeah.
My first game, I was like, okay, we got to that point, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that differently because I can't play anything now.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but for some people, it's not always as clear that
Yeah.
it was a decision that they did wrong because a lot of games just teach them that's how it works.
Yeah. Hmm.
And Grand Archives is not as forgiving. And if I had to like really boil it down, and I could have talked less than 45 minutes and just said it's not as forgiving,
Yeah.
but that's the end result of it.
Okay. All right. So I kind of want to finish this off with one question, right? So, what do you think? What is one major thing you're waiting for Grand Archive to take off
Okay, something that it needs.
parabolically, like in growth and whether you want to talk about player growth, whether you want to talk about, um, yeah, like how does Grand Archive become Flesh and Blood? I think Flesh and Blood is fairly big now.
Yeah.
Flesh and Blood, I think, also has similar issues where it's very difficult, so it's hard for new players to come in. But it's
Yep.
kind of past the testing ground, right? There's so many card games that die around the 2 to 3 year age, right? But I'm trying to think like what is one thing you're looking for? You're like, hey, if this thing happens, I think Grand Archive could really, right, and just magic wand it. You can do whatever you want.
Sure. That is a really tricky thing. Because I do think there are some things that could happen that would cause parabolic growth.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily likely or have a potential to backfire spectacularly as well. So like one of the things I think about is
Yeah.
the right collaboration.
Oh yes, that was
Okay.
my point too. I was going to talk about collabs. Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm sorry, Mark. Well, I guess it's good that we're on the same page
We're on the same
about
page,
this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, then as you would think too, the right collaboration is uh what would get people to look at the game more deeply than they already are. And like if I break it down, the reason Grand Archive is not getting popular in places is because it's not being given a chance.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a game that stands on its own when you give it a try, when you see it, you hold the cards, you're like, wow, this is high quality card. Wow, this artwork is really good. Wow, this gameplay is really good. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing about Grand Archive that I feel doesn't deliver. So it can't be at like any of those things that I can say. I can't say, well, if they just improved the card art, then it would be, like, cause you look at
Yeah.
these CSRs and you're like, this is one of the best looking cards I've ever seen in my life.
Yep. Agreed.
Um, it's not a thing that's a problem for them, but the biggest thing is just how do you force that stuff into someone's face
Yeah.
so that they like actually experience it
Yeah.
with their eyes and their fingers and their nose and their tongue if they have to.
Yeah.
Then once they do, then they go, oh, this is really good. And one of the best ways you can do that is just say, well, here's a thing you really like. Look at it now.
This card game has it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing that it can fail too, because like a collaboration is a
Yeah.
tricky thing.
Yeah.
If it's not a good collaboration, if it's not one that does succeed at bringing a lot of people in or is not done carefully, it's a thing that can damage that sort of integrity of the IP that they're trying to build as well.
Yeah.
So it would have to be good. But if I get a magic wand, then I don't know. Did you have any ideas for IPs when you were going to answer this?
Perfect collaborations only. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I see that. And I would agree with you because I can see the downside of bad collaborations, like what we're seeing on the Magic side, right? Like these Universes Beyond, some of the stuff, I mean, sure, it's bringing new players. I'm sure it is. But are you losing more than you're bringing in? Because there's a lot of angry players who are like, why is a unicorn in my game? Why is there Transformers now? Which even that's like in in the same company. But then you're just copying the anime stuff now. Like Magic's doing that too, and it's so dumb, right? Like it's like Magic does the random collab. If we collab with everything, eventually we'll hit it right?
Yeah,
That's their
shotgun
idea,
approach.
right? Exactly. And I think that is an example of a bad collaboration. I think things that doesn't even make sense. Like the recent one I think that just got announced is Cowboy Bebop and Magic. I'm like, what the? I mean, other than the fact that we just had a cowboy set, I guess.
Yep.
Why?
Leave Cowboy Bebop for Universes, please. They do a better justice, I think, to it.
Probably. Yeah.
I like Lord of the Rings was, I thought, a brilliant collab for Magic.
Agreed.
Like that was, I love that set. I thought it was an incredible set. Yeah. I thought it felt just right. And Grand Archive would need I would think if they had a collab on that level,
yeah,
then that is something that could people could get into it. They could, and they have a setup where a lot like Magic's multiverse.
Yeah.
They can justify things in a way that, might make some sense or something. Enough sense for people to be okay with it. Cause like you said, you're going to have people who get upset. And it's about how well you can kind of sell it to those people. And it really, there is a number game to it. It's just like, does this bring in more people than it loses? For a small game like Grand Archive, though, that ratio has to be astronomical, right? Like you can't afford to lose too many players on a collab like that. So it's really got to be good. And if it is, though, that would certainly knock it out of the park.
I'm actually kind of curious from the audience too, like which collab do you guys think will be a good one? My vote, by the way, is on Fate. I didn't even know about Fate as an anime.
Yeah.
And then I started watching. I'm like, why am I just watching Grand Archive? This is crazy.
Exactly.
This is insult. Like, what is this? Is the Spirit Blade Onsult? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
My magic wand moment, I think, is since IP was taken, my secondary one, just having traveled to Asia to see like what the game looks like over there. I will say it's got to be like the and this is kind of stealing your point earlier too about the simplicity is a better onboarding of the game. And I don't mean like learn to plays. I don't mean like starter decks. What I mean is like what Magic has is like Commander, right? It's a super casual format. It's like you just bring a deck and everyone laughs and people are like, I have a bread baking deck. My deck makes beer. Oh, cool. And it's like just a bunch of jokes.
I hate that that's actually a deck that you
probably is. There is a food deck that revolves around like the hobbits making food. It's actually a legit deck. It's actually pretty good.
There's a Fallout Nuka-Cola vending machine combo deck now too.
Yeah, exactly, right? But that would be one way to do it. I think the other way is like something that's like take Grand Archive and just simplify the game, right? So that people can show up. Like I think one of the best parts, and this is why I'm like, When is drafting back? When is drafting back? Because in Magic, one of the like, look, if I go to any LGS on the weekend and it's like Friday Night Magic, whatever, the time when I see the most amount of dads and kids and like wives and girlfriends is during what? Limited,
Or
when they play like
yeah,
sealed,
sure.
right? You take 6 packs, you open it, build a deck, two-headed giants. That is, dude, the two-headed giants is like built for a dad and a kid, a mom and a kid, whatever, right? And it's like
Yep.
but that's how you bring new players in, because they're gonna look at it. It's not very, you have actually literally somebody sitting next to you on your team that's gonna work with you to build a deck, and then you play as a team. You like flatten this price structure, so it's kind of like very welcoming for new players. And then just like, hey, you learned it. Do you want to go more advanced? Here's more cards. Now build a competitive deck, right? Oh, and you've seen some other competitive decks. Here's more cards. Go build even more interesting decks. And that's how you get the ramped into Magic. In fact, I was not playing Magic, and I got ramped into Magic because it was drafting and Commander. Literally, those two things brought me back to Magic. I have not played for 20 years. I think the last time I played Magic was in middle school, right? And like my friends were like, "Hey, just come show up for a draft." I didn't bring anything. I didn't need to bring anything, and I could play Magic. And I was like, "Oh, this is better than I thought it would be." So
Sure.
that's what I would like. I mean, I think that's very attainable now too. But that's if for me. I think having that, we could definitely see a parabolic motion to this game, right? And just like somehow we figure out a way to make that like monetarily very accessible for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it can't be like, oh, here's a draft, here's $40. Like it's a little high. Like if we can make that like 10 to 15 to 20, boom. I think
Yep.
we're super in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the issue that a lot of games have when they try to shoehorn a draft in. It's like, well, draft would only work in this game if you can open 6 or 8 packs or something, and it's like that's too many. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the perfect collab would actually be very difficult to find, and I don't actually. I just want to be clear. I don't actually expect that to happen or think it will, and if not, if it did, it would be a while.
What do you think about the Square Live collab?
The Square Live collab.
I asked the question, guys.
It's an interesting question. I think that it is. It's a reasonable collab,
Mm-hmm.
which but I had to learn like who they were, what it was. I had no idea. The big thing.
Did you know about VTubing before the Square Live collab?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yes, I was
Cool.
familiar with VTubing.
I need to know what level of weeb you are on. So
I am not a VTuber watcher.
okay.
So that said, I am friends with people who are extremely into like HoloLive,
Okay.
and I've learned some terms. I've learned
Nice.
some companies, and I've learned some names of
Kurosanji?
VTubers.
All right.
But I'm not a viewer, a consumer of the content. So as some would say, I'm not cultured like them, I guess.
Okay.
Whatever they would say about that. But so I had never heard of Square Live though, because I learned that it was a very regional
Super
VTuber
regional. Mm-hmm.
thing. So when I first saw it, I have to say my first reaction was, oh, I didn't expect that this soon. I'm not sure what this is about. I stabilized myself. I went and I did some research. I thought, let me just figure out what's going on. I learned about Taiwan's surge of Grand Archive interest.
Yeah.
I learned about who Square Live was, the VTubers and everything. And then I thought, this makes sense. I think it's fine. Like it's, and it's kind of in a way, it's kind of what you and I, Mark, are asking for right now, just in a small regional area. And it might even be like a test for doing it on a grander scale at some point, in a different region, something that would appeal more to North American players, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't think we could do like that for us. It's got to be very different, but I can see, and the thing is, like, I felt, I was a little bit kind of like precarious with that collab as well. I wasn't saying it's negative. I was just not sure. Right.
Yeah.
And I was afraid of just, again, a lot of bad taste in my mouth with like, MTG collabs recently.
Yeah.
So I was afraid of like, is this the beginning of something like that? And then of course I went to Asia. I saw how passionate people were about the game. And I saw how passionate people were about the game because of Square Live.
Yep.
And that's where I think it clicked for me that like, oh, these people like here really care about this, right? And it's like, imagine if like we're playing Grand Archive and I don't know, they're like, oh, instead of I think, for example, why did a lot of North America take up Grand Archive, right? It's an anime card game. Why? I think for us it was because it's simple. It wasn't like, honestly, if Grand Archive literally had attack stats that were like 2,000 or 5,000, I would not have given this game a chance.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, imagine if they're like, well, because we're an Asian card game, it's going to say 5,000 attack and 6,000 defense. Have fun. Like, I'll be like, okay, we're done. Like, right. And so they gave us 5, 6 or what, not even that high, like 1, 2. Right. So I'm like, great, I'm in. So we got kind of what we wanted. And I can't be so selfish to say, but the whole world has to like what I like.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think it is, that was my takeaway too. Ultimately, it was just the decision of like, well, I need to understand that the world is a big place and these places operate differently.
Yeah.
And I also agree. I wasn't negative at first, but I also just was uncertain. And I just wanted to, I wanted some reassurance that this wasn't just the start of something.
Yeah.
So that would feel like it was destroying the integrity of what was built. But when I understood again that, the importance of it there and what it meant to the player base there and how well the player base there, the actual target for the collab had received it, it was like
easy.
Yeah, no problem. That it was an easy choice to make to do that. And to your point about just like entry points, another thing that I've said for a little while just about the game is that Grand Archive is a highly competitive game. Again, not as forgiving. I went through all this plenty before, but that makes it an incredible competitive experience. And I couldn't agree more that the best possible way to realistically get some serious growth going would be to make a really approachable entry point to the game. And I think a casual friendly entry point is important. I'm looking forward to seeing at some point whatever, because Weebs of the Shore always has something kind of off the wall to answer whatever problem comes their way. So I don't doubt that someone's cooking somewhere there on something, but at some point I'm hoping to see whatever they've cooked up for sort of this way of learning about the game in a setting that feels friendlier to people, so that because right now it's like grab the Sylvie deck off the starter shelf and then have fun XOing or OXing, I should say.
Persona deck, same thing. Yeah.
Yep. Which is, unfortunate that that's how it goes. But I think these recollection decks are at least they're competitive side, not a casual side. But I have high hope that they're going to be at least a little more competent out of the box. Than a starter deck, which will at least deal with the portion of players who are willing to put in a little bit of that learning effort to be competitive right away.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's a great segue to the second part of this conversation.
Yes.
You used to have stamina and energy for it, but yeah,
I sure do. I always have stamina energy for talking about Grand Archive. I know we're going late here, but that is okay with me if it's okay with you.
All right. So that's going to be the end of this video on Main Deck's channel. But if you want to hear the part 2 of this discussion where we talk finance and some of the future of collectability in Grand Archive, hop over to my channel at Solar Games, and then we'll continue with part 2.
Absolutely. So everyone, that'll be linked down in the description below. Make sure to go to Mark's channel, click on that, hit the subscribe button. You don't even have to watch anything first. It's actually free.
This guy.
You can just hit the subscribe button right there, and then you can click on the video and watch our wonderful conversation that we're about to have on that. But if either way, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you over on Solar Games for the next part.
All right. See you guys.